the huge difference between Blizzard and GGG. So he's going to be talking and sort of comparing like Diablo 4 and Path of Exile 2. This is talkative Try. I actually met him in person. Super friendly guy, by the way.
There's a riveting tale of two titans here. One is setting itself up for tremendous success, while the other released and has been clawing its way back into the good graces of its players for the past year. Of course, I'm talking about Path of Exile 2 and Diablo 4, two of the biggest ARPG discussion topics of our generation.
And normally comparing PoE to like Diablo doesn't really work too well because D4 and PoE 1 have such like different audiences. I do think Path of Exile 2 is going to have a significant more overlap in terms of audience after the latest testing we did. He was there. We both went and tested the LA event here recently, just last month, or was it this month? It might have been the beginning of this month. I forget. Time's flown by. Anyway, we went and tested the console couch co-op, and it is obvious they are attempting to make the console couch co-op completely accessible to people that, one, have never played PoE, and two, are just like people that are going to be on the PlayStation Store and see like a recommended game that says 2-player and just download it. Like that seems extremely obvious with the amount of like recommendations and pre-set up builds and stuff like that they do for you. Plus how smooth the controller and couch co-op is and how easy it is to understand. I think it's going to do very, very well, by the way.
In the historic past, it used to be Diablo 2, Torchlight, Titan Quest, and other games. Recently, it was Diablo 3 and Path of Exile. Last Epoch has broken onto the scene, but even that game, with its incredible player numbers and its deep customization, has not driven the same sort of hype that the unreleased Path of Exile 2 and the very much in progress Diablo 4. And I'd like...
Okay, true, but also like... Okay, Diablo 4 had pretty much the largest marketing I've ever seen in the history of gaming. So I think Diablo had a ton of hype around it because everyone wants to see the next Diablo one, and they had been kind of like baiting people with Diablo, like, ooh, Diablo, and all these BlizzCons, etc. So obviously people were hyped for it. It's the Diablo franchise, but also it had the largest marketing budget I have ever seen. They had like BTS, they had like Megan Fox. They had, you could see the Times Square billboards. I mean, the ads were everywhere. I have never seen so many ads for a game as Diablo 4. This was pushed extremely heavily, for sure. So I think that's part of the reason we saw so much hype. Path of Exile 2 is getting some marketing, but not near as much. And Last Epoch is an indie company. That when I've done sponsors for Path of Exile, for Last Epoch, and for Diablo, and Last Epoch, I'm gonna put it this way, does not have the same budget. Okay, they can't pay the same. It's a smaller company, and I like those guys. I'm actually in the Last Epoch corner. I would love to see them succeed. All right, but I don't think that they're going to be able to compete with these types of numbers in terms of just like pure raw dollar bills you can throw at marketing. So I think that Last Epoch would be hard to compare. But Diablo has had overwhelming hype. One, because it's Diablo. Two, but I think it's mostly the insane amount of marketing that game had, which is why we saw such a drop-off, because so many players got grabbed and pulled into Diablo that are not part of the franchise previously, because they saw ads, basically.
I'd like to talk about both of those games today, and how the developers are creating them in different ways from the outset. There's a long story here, but I'm going to try to condense it down into about 10 minutes. We'll see how I do. And if you like listening to these type of stories, and if you like all the latest Path of Exile 2 content, please make sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, buddy, and that sub notification bell so you get all the latest talking.
I'm already talking.
Also, haven't done it in a while. Absolutely a massive thank you to all of my Patreon supporters and my YouTube members.
Oh, wow.
You are all phenomenal. Now, without further ado, let's get into the tale of Diablo 4 and Path of Exile 2 and how they have been developed differently, beginning in their alpha phases. Diablo 4 was in progress for quite some time. Diablo 3 didn't really pan out. It launched, it had one expansion, and not many content updates after that. It was not a competitor to Path of Exile 1 in terms of the amount of content that it actually brought into the game.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but Diablo 3 was poorly received on launch, but I believe wasn't Path of Exile sort of the same thing? And then the Diablo 3 expansion was actually quite good, Reaper of Souls. This is one of the things that, when I played Diablo 3, I was omega casual with Diablo. Like I literally played it on a controller, blasting the whirlwind barb while I'm taking like phone calls when I worked in a call center. I was like mega casual, and I thought that the game was good when it launched. I actually wasn't in the like YouTube space. I wasn't reading Reddit. All I did was go to work. I was working at the call center, but also that was later on with the expansion. Previously, when they had launched, like on launch day, I was actually working at Best Buy. So I had two different experiences with me playing the game throughout the history of its time. One I kind of came back to when I was in the call center, and then when it launched, I was actually working at Best Buy. And everyone there was just having a good time. This is part of the reason when I talk about, and when I was talking about Diablo 4 like on launch and kind of talking about games just in general, I remember back to these days of being completely disconnected from like the talk about the game, because everyone talks about this now, about how Diablo 3 like had huge issues on launch and was poorly received and all that. But like I didn't get any of that at all, because I wasn't reading feedback, I wasn't watching videos, I was just playing the game. Like just straight up playing the game. I was like, oh, this game's fun. Like I just literally had none of the problems. I had some of the errors codes or whatnot, but I didn't have any of the problems related to the actual game. So when I cover games now, I try to like look back and remember the days of when I was completely disconnected from like the hubbaloo, I don't know how you say that, right? Hullabaloo of games, and just remember just playing the game and not just sitting on threads and stuff talking about it. So for me, I had kind of a different experience than Diablo 3, but I hear this all the time that Diablo 3 had like Omega issues on launch, and it's just something that was completely went over my head.
Sure, it probably had phenomenal player numbers, but a lot of people sought more from a Diablo game. Cue Diablo 4, which was in development for a long time and had a lot of different stages to it. It had game directors come and go, developers rise and fall, and the game itself went through many iterations. But when it was finally announced after the Diablo Immortal fiasco, the developers began being a lot more open with what systems were going into the game and how they were designing items and monsters and classes and the like. And when it was getting super close to that finished state back in 2023, or a finished state in the eyes of Blizzard, Blizzard invited a bunch of hardcore Diablo players to test out the game. That includes content creators like Rax and Woody Joe and lots of people whose names you don't know, because instead of making content, they spent their time absolutely blasting through Diablo 3 or Diablo 2, and probably other ARPGs as well.
Okay, so little known fact, the original early access for Diablo, I'm talking the first one, went out to more than content creators, actually. This went out to people that had played the game significantly. Depending upon your hours in Diablo games, they would invite you, including Immortal. So if you had just had a lot of hours into the Diablo franchise, you were invited. This is something that people didn't realize. It's just they think it's content creators. It was actually more than content. There was tons of people that never made a single video that got invited just because of the amount of pure hours they had in the game as well. That was the very first one. Then there was, before the game came out, there was an invite that was an early access availability before, like right before the launch of the game, when the game was already solidified. It wasn't an alpha, it wasn't beta. The betas were open and all you just had to buy a fucking KFC sandwich, okay? But the early access directly before the game came out was for content creators to make videos and build guides and stuff and start driving hype around it, basically is what that was for. But the very first access was to anybody that had played the Diablo franchise, and it was heavily watermarked with just your specific number, so no one could make videos about it, no one could leak it. You would immediately get banned because it was tied to everyone's individual BNet. So there was like thousands of just normal Diablo players who actually tested the early access because they wanted to get the feedback early. And let me tell you, it was a little bit more rough in the alpha.
Blizzard invited all of these people to test out the campaign, the end game, the feel of the classes and the items, all the different interacting systems. And from what I've heard from some inside sources and lots of public knowledge, these people, the testers, wrote novels on how to improve the game. Exactly how to do it. They've been playing Diablo games for a while. They've been talking to people in the community, creating content, reading comments, knowing what people enjoyed. So they crafted all of these recommendations into literal tomes, sent it to Blizzard. Blizzard just ignored it. They moved forward with their vision, and they released Diablo 4 in the state that they thought was best.
Okay, true, actually.
Now, in early 2023, when they had that very closed beta, basically a press weekend, everybody thought the game was in a great state. But some people, content creators, testers who had played the alpha, knew what was to come. And sure enough, when it released in June of that year, people were very disappointed in all the problems that it had. The lack of endgame, the item systems, the classes, the balance, all that was broken. People didn't enjoy it. And for the past year, Diablo 4 has spent its time getting into a better state, really clawing.
My take on this is that everyone loved the game when the betas came out because the betas were to level 25, and basically the gameplay is the same from 1 to 25 as it is to 1 to 100, minus just spamming nightmare dungeons. So because of that, the beta was the exact right level to make you like see what the game has to offer, and then beyond that, people would have immediately seen the issues. So the beta being so low level drove a lot of like, this game's going to be great hype. I mean, everyone had fun in the beta, dude. There's feedback related to some stuff, but let's be fucking honest. In the beta, everyone was like, this game's going to be great. And if the beta had been like 1 to 60 or something, or 1 to 70, 1 to 80 maybe, I think that there probably would have been a lot more negative feedback or stuff people could see literally earlier. Because in the beta, it was early enough that it's like, you couldn't even get to World Tier 3 yet, and everyone was like, I can't wait to see the rest of it.
Clawing its way back into the good graces of the people, as I said at the start of the video. And you know what the funny thing is? A lot of these problems were pointed out exactly by the testers. They said, there are problems with items. You need to build out your endgame to compete with other ARPGs today. You need to have bosses. The balance is whack. The feel here is poor. Oh, the open world. What's the point? And for the past year, they've been addressing all of these concerns, tackling.
Yeah, but they weren't going to push back the date, so they probably recognized and agreed with the feedback, and then they're like, all right, well, we're going to have to live develop the game after the release because we're on the schedule, which I think the point he's probably getting to is like Path of Exile saw these issues and literally pushed back their dates. Is what they did. They pushed back the testing and all that because they're probably like, you're right, there's some issues. Because let me tell you, the first playtest of Path of Exile 2, there's actually some issues. In Path of Exile 2's second playtest, they actually addressed the issues and they had pushed back the date. So I think that's probably where he's going with this.
Them trying to become a titan once more in the industry. And they've done a great job. People enjoy Season 4, even if it's not what I enjoy. Lots of other people really do like it, and many are excited for Diablo 4, the Vessel of Hatred as well. So we'll see how that goes. But now, after talking about Diablo 4 and looking at that journey, let's take a look at what Grinding Gear Games have done with Path of Exile 2's early testing phases and how they've reacted to feedback in the lead up to launch. GGG has been cooking Path of Exile 2 for a long time, probably longer than Blizzard cooked Diablo 4. However, during this time, they have iterated on their vision in many different instances. They even split out Path of Exile 2 from Path of Exile 1, turning it into its own game. And only recently has it really been opened to people outside of Grinding Gear Games and their immediate family and friends for testing. And even at Grinding Gear Games itself, they were open to changing their design, their philosophies, their vision, and reacting to feedback. Jonathan Rogers, the game director on Path of Exile 2, talked about how he played PoE 2 with his wife, or he watched his wife play.
Honestly, Jonathan Roberts is one of the nicest dudes I've ever met. I got a chance to actually talk to him like at some length one-on-one, and it made me have a lot more faith in the game. You know how sometimes you talk to somebody about their career or something, and you can tell the person is like passionate about what they do or like really care? They're like, there's actually zero... Rogers. Yeah, I don't know why I always say Jonathan Roberts. I say that literally every time. Jonathan Rogers, you're right. But there's literally 0%. There's literally 0% bullshit with him. Like, you know what I mean? You talk to the dude and it's like zero bullshit detected. It's all, there's no corporate speak. It's just all about gaming. You call out something. You know what's hilarious is you call out something about like, oh, this is an issue in the game. Immediately be like, oh shit, you're right. That's a problem. And like, that's just it. It's just that simple. Like, I love the dude.
And she wouldn't know when her life was low and she'd end up dying. She was good at the fights, she enjoyed it, but she would just die and not use her flasks because she didn't know that she was about to fall. Well, so they made changes based on that. Now you have a red outline around your screen. It slowly starts to darken and get red. There are all these subtle cues and design additions that they've made to respond to even the most minor pieces of feedback. And now that other people are playing Path of Exile 2, first in the event in March of this year, and then again in June, they're making huge design decisions. They're going back on things that they thought would feel good and they were wrong about. And they're reacting to community opinions about other games. We mentioned Last Epoch before. Grinding Your Games is implementing sort of a auction house in Path of Exile 2 because of the success of Last Epoch's trading system.
That's why when I mention things that are in other games and people are like, yeah, you know, but that's a ripoff of the other game. It's like, good. Steal good concepts and put them in Diablo 4. Steal good concepts and put them in Path of Exile 2. I don't care if the concept's not original. I just care if the game's fun. I think that's like 90% of players.
And in the March event, when people saw that the flask system felt horrid, it felt like
it was really
backwards progressing constantly.
It was really bad.
In June, the new build fixed that entirely. And now in the June playtest, people are talking about wanting to dynamically be able to switch between mouse and keyboard and a controller. So Grinding Your Games is going to implement that. Now, there are many other examples that I can think of and talk about to do with Grinding Your Games and the way they react to feedback, but I don't want to make this a 3.5-hour video. Instead, I just want to get the point across that the way that Blizzard and Grinding Your Games operate is very different. Blizzard, even presented with novels of evidence about the design of their game being wrong and not appealing to players, will refuse to change unless the bottom line does not showcase profitability. If those average player numbers drop, if those concurrent users fall away, then and only then will they back off on their decisions, or at least
I can see where he's going with this, but I will kindly disagree a little bit. I actually think Blizzard does attempt to change the things, and this isn't like a Blizzard chill copium take. The difference here is it's the amount of time it takes them to do that. Like, I legitimately think they listen to, you know, Rax will go up there and make his video and it's be like, these are the problems with this, and this, and this, and this. I've seen them take the feedback and they'll be like, okay, this is great feedback, thank you. I don't think they take it and, like, completely throw it away. Like, for instance, the early access I was saying true about earlier. I think at this point in day and age, they take it and it's the speed at which they can execute on it that people feel. It takes a while to execute upon feedback. I do directly see them listen to feedback. That's why we have Loot Report. Maybe it took them a while, and maybe his point is that, okay, well, audience has to dip significantly where they're like in crisis mode in order to do that. I just think it's a speed issue of what's going on. Of course, there's a great point in the chat about, well, how about the Druid? Here's your Druid buffs. All right, I mean, fair enough, you got me there. But that's what I think it is. I don't think it's necessarily like they purposefully are like, let's just toss away all the feedback. I think it takes them a while to implement it.
That's what we've seen with Diablo.
Because they're building these seasons in tandem, so it's like they have two teams working on 2 seasons. So they have season 5 and season 6 both being worked on in tandem, which means any feedback being received right now probably isn't going in the game into season 7 or maybe season 6 at the earliest.
4. With Path of Exile 2, which isn't even in early access yet, the developers are already pivoting on decisions they've made based on the feedback of their most avid players, of the players that speak for the community. Like myself, Jonathan Rogers called me the most positive person in the universe because when I played Path of Exile 2 in March of this year, I was very open about the fact that it didn't feel very good. It felt janky. It felt like I was always going backward and I wasn't progressing.
That's true.
And that was mostly due to the flask system and the fact that I wasn't getting good item drops. So they fixed both.
Dude, the flask system was making me and Gauzy both fucking moan about how bad it was. Like, Frosty, do not clip that. It absolutely was. It was brew, though, dude. The flask system was really, really dog shit. I mean, you constantly were going back into town over and over and over again. It was unbelievably bad. So I'm super glad they fixed it in the next playtest because it actually would have ruined the game.
Both. They put item seeds into the game. They gave you more access to support gems and skill gems. They made it so that flasks now refill when you kill normal monsters again, so you don't always have to go back to that well.
Yeah,
that
was
so much better in June, and that was a direct result, not just of my feedback, even though I do pride myself in giving some good feedback to Jonathan and the rest of the team, but due to the feedback of many other players. And that is such a stark difference, and it's great to see. Now, when we get our hands on early access later this year, when legions of us are playing in Rayclass 2.0, playing as a druid or a mercenary or a huntress, and we're giving our feedback on the skill gems, on the unique items, on how the endgame system feels in PoE 2, I'm confident that Grinding Gear Games is not going to ignore our feedback. They're going to pivot, they're going to take it in stride, and they are going to make positive changes for the future of Path of Exile 2. Truly though, whatever game you enjoy, whether it's Diablo 4, whether it's Path of Exile 2, or some other game out there, it's good that right now developers seem to be reacting to the feedback of the community. Because even though a lot of the times we think we want something and we really don't, sometimes we are right. And when the developers can suss out exactly when we are correct, well, it feels so darn good. And make sure you watch this video right here in which
it's on the other side, Talkative. You fucked up, Aaron.
Before Path of Exile 2 releases later this year. Anyways, that's all for this video. Talakura, Exiles.
All right, that's Talkative Try. You gotta love this guy.